Today you're going to hear from the dads, and by special request on November 2nd, you're going to hear from the wives. I think that's where you're going to hear the truth about what really happens, right? We heard some really touching stories from the sons and some really nice stories about generational trust and business acumen and challenges that are faced in the support of the generation ahead of them, which was really nice. I have no idea what we're going to get from the dads today, so it'll be interesting. I've asked them for the truth. We may or may not get that, but you can count on the wives for the truth on November 2nd. So definitely put that on your schedules to join us here again on November 2nd. Remember, this was their request, so they must have something to tell us.
Both wives?
I don't know which of what wives or what generation. I think the more the merrier, I think, in my opinion, because that's going to really give us the full picture. We are recording today with a new recording system. We have been recording the last few sessions. We're getting ready to up our technical game. If you go to the website, cvifb.org, it will redirect you to our site hosted on the Fresno State site. And if you click under events or resources, you will find your way to these videos. And so we are now recording all of our sessions. So in the event you're unable to be here in person and ask questions in person, we will be posting them online right now. They are available to the entire public. At some point, we will be making those available only to members down the road. But for now, you have access to those resources. So please go on, view, share. If anybody in your family wants to watch your performance here today, you can definitely send them the link. It'll take a week or two to get up, but it'll be up there. Really, really important to share with you. We have a really exciting event happening for the first time actually in California. So they do these things called Next Gen retreats in other parts of the country, Canada, Chicago, Wisconsin, Iowa, and we are the first ones to bring it to California. And we're doing it in partnership with Wonder Valley and the Oken family, which is extremely supportive. Kayleen is back there. She's on our board. Their family's been very supportive of our organization for many, many years, and they will be hosting this event. We are limiting our first year to 40 participants. You must be 25 to 40 years old. You must be second or higher gen in your company. You must not be in the president's seat yet, but perhaps on a path to get there. And the whole idea is to do some team building, communication skills. We're going to have guest speakers. They're going to be able to relate to what it's like to be in the family business. We will have a keynoter that's within that age demographic. We are waiting for final confirmation, so I can't release it quite yet to you. But there are flyers out in the foyer. It's in April. As I said, it's limited to 40 participants. We really want these next gens to bond with each other as much as we want them to get something out of the event itself, because we think supporting the younger generations in a way that allows them to use each other to support and network with each other is the most valuable thing we can do and provide that platform for them. So Next Gen Retreat, April 7th and 8th. It's going to be super great, and the information is out there. Help us spread the word if you know families that might be interested or have children that are in their family companies that are up and coming. With that, we're going to get right into our panel. Oh, wait. Does Bob want to talk? Where's the dean?
The dean's got his flame here.
I lost track of Bob Harper. Now a word from our dean.
Thank you, Jane. I just want to welcome all of you. It's so delightful to see this room filled. These events are very valuable. I got a lot out of the last one, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this one, and then certainly the one on November 2nd, because that's where the real truth will be told, as Jane said. The Institute for Family Business supports economic development here in the Valley, and family businesses are a big part of economic development. We do have these events open to the public, but in order to be able to put them on, please understand that it does take some resources. So we do have memberships for family business, and I'd encourage you to consider a membership in the family business. If you're interested, you can chat with Jane, you can contact me, or contact Lori, the contact person that you RSVP to, and please consider becoming a member of our Family Business Institute to help support us be able to put on events like this, as well as the Next Gen Retreat, and then the Family Business of the Year award, which we do every year in May. Anyway, my job is just to welcome you and then to turn it over back to Jane to run the show. So back to Jane.
Back to me. Okay, and I'm going to just turn it right over to Neil Koenig. Has been a big supporter of the Institute for Family Business, has been on the board, has consulted in many, many family businesses across the valley, and helps us put these panel discussions together, which have been some of our more popular events and certainly extremely valuable. So with that, I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jane, and hello, everybody. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. The members of the Family Business Institute had a questionnaire to fill out about programming and succession in family businesses. Got a lot of endorsement as a topic that people were really interested in. And that's because there's just generationally across our country, us baby boomers are transferring wealth as well as our assets to the younger generation, and in the case of family businesses, to the management of those family businesses. It's going on at an unprecedented rate. And so just in this last year or so, you'll recall we had Producers Dairy, the Shahadi family, father and 3 sons, talked about how they did succession. And then we had Mike and Bill Betts of the Betts Company, which is a real rarity. Their company is in the 7th generation, started by a British immigrant right after the Civil War, and it's the same company and the same family. They moved here from the Bay Area, and they're located in Fresno. It was fun to hear their story. And then we heard the sons, and tonight it's my pleasure to introduce to you 3 of the fathers. Sitting next to me is my friend Dale Cross. He is the founder of 4 Seas Metal Company. And we're going to hear about his early experiences. His son was Preston, who's sitting right over there, and his wife Carol, who helped found the business, and their older son, Graydon. Also, I'd like you to meet Lou McMurray in the middle here. Lou is 2nd generation. His father founded the business, and the company has his namesake, the Charles McMurray Company. They are a cabinetry hardware distribution company. So we have construction as part of our Fresno economy, or Valley economy, distribution, which is a very important part of our Valley's economy. And then our good friend Leon Dermengen, he's the founder of Durco Foods. That's the tree nut company that exports almonds, pistachios, pecans, walnuts, and hazelnuts, not pine nuts, but all the rest of the other ones to all parts of the globe except for the North Pole and the South Pole. They don't have any representatives there. But other than that, they got the world covered. And so we've got agriculture represented as well. And you met their sons, and somebody else that you met last time is Ryan Morgenstern. And Ryan's father called me twice, apologizing for not being able to be here this evening because there was a death in the extended family, and today is the Memorial Day, and my usual brassy self didn't ask him if he could change the Memorial Day so he could be memorial service to come to our event, but he really felt bad because he wanted to clear up the story that Ryan, sitting right over there, told us last time. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, we're going to ask these gentlemen about some of their background, because backgrounds are important in family businesses, and then we'll get in the middle section to succession stuff, and then towards the end we'll talk about family involvement and things like that. These 3 gentlemen will be able to go until 7 or 8 o'clock tonight, so we'll tell by your fidgetiness and fatigue and all that to quit, but we'll time this thing carefully. You guys know that I'm interested, and I think everybody would be interested, what your early years were like in the 2 businesses where the founders are, and then Lou, your early experiences as you succeeded your father. So you've gone through this a couple of times now. So Dale, you got stuck sitting next to me. Let me ask you, what were your early years like starting off in business for yourself here in Fresno?
I think it was probably much easier than it is today. It was just a lot of work. We just put our head down and did what needed to be done and worked hard, and it just kept growing, and it wasn't really that hard, other than the work. As far as growing the business wasn't hard, but the work, there was just a lot of it, and it kept coming.
Well, how did you get into sheet metal instead of some other trade? Because you're super with your hands.
When I got out of high school, I wanted to be a machinist, and I went to City College, and the machine shop class was in the afternoon, and I had a job in the afternoon, so I asked them what other classes they had. So they said, well, what about sheet metal? I said, okay, I'll try that. Well, at the time they had a class, it was a 2-year course, and if you completed the 2-year course, they would call the union and tell them they had someone that was ready to become an apprentice. Well, I did the 2-year course in 1 year, went to work, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, how'd you have the guts enough to go into business for yourself rather than work in the existing sheet metal businesses, because you've had competition your whole career?
We had several laundromats and an ice vending business, and I couldn't keep up, so I had to quit my regular job to keep up with the side businesses. And my wife Carol worked for a CPA firm. Well, one of the CPAs at the firm was Robert Jensen's son. Well, they asked if I would be interested in doing service work for them. Well, sure. So from the very first summer, we were buried with work. And it's been that way ever since.
Just because of hard work, yeah, right. Lou, what were your early days? Because you saw your dad start the business, presumably, with your mother, and then you got into it. What were those early days like for you?
Well, I didn't actually remember them starting it because it started the year I was born. But I do remember as a little boy being in the warehouse and listening to discussion about the business, and worked part-time at Summers probably since I was 12. I remember the going rate was $1 an hour at that time. And then worked off and on there through college and graduate school and the military, and then started working full-time in 1972. For me, there was never a question in my mind that that's what I would eventually do. Part of that probably is I don't know that I had the self-confidence to do something on my own. But secondly, it was just a business that looked like it was thriving, making a profit, one that offered an opportunity. So when I started, I didn't start with a whole lot of self-confidence, and I don't think I was viewed particularly with respect to the others that worked there, since I was young and had never worked anywhere else before that time. It is vividly different then than it is now with respect to everything was done manually in terms of the accounting, inventory control, purchasing, whereas now everything is done electronically. Sales were completely different without cell phones and fax machines than it currently is. So the evolution from the electronic from manual system to electronic age was probably the biggest change in our industry in general. Also, the business at that time was relatively small, and we're probably 50 times bigger than it is now. So just the whole structure, how you manage it, and the number of people involved makes it quite a lot different than it was then. And the evolution of other people running our company has kind of been ongoing even before my kids got involved, because we've had a general manager for 50 years. And that general manager did much of the day-to-day operations in tandem with what I did, which is probably more in the sales end of the business. So I was used to delegating and not having to make all the decisions myself from almost the beginning. So now that my kids are involved, the idea of having decisions delegated is not a novel experience. And then also for us, we try and make sure that we have a lot of non-family management in our team that is a strong management group to balance out the family portion of that participation, and even to include on our board, we have 3 family, 3 non-family. And I find that very helpful in that the non-family folks have no axe to grind with respect to internal family issues, and also I think it just offers a good perspective, which is independent of where you can get a little closed-minded with just your own group. Maybe I've talked enough.
No, you haven't, but your number will come up again, my friend. Actually, let me just ask this. Your son, Charlie, last time we asked him how he got into family business, and he said, my dad wouldn't hire me until I went to college, I got an MBA, and I worked elsewhere. It sounded like your dad handled you in a similar fashion.
Well, except I never worked anywhere else. I've never had another job other than this one. With my kids, I don't remember whether it was Charlie or Jed, it doesn't matter, but I remember they were working part-time at the warehouse in the summer and asking me if they could take Friday off. And I just didn't want to deal with the question. I didn't want to be part of that decision. I just wanted that kind of thing out of my life. And it just dawned on me at that moment that let's let somebody else be the benevolent employer for a while, aside from me. And also, I think having them work somewhere else offer them the opportunity to gain the self-confidence to know that they can work in the free enterprise system and thrive on their own without having something handed to them. And then I think also it brings an awful lot to the table with an experience outside of McMurray Company, and I think we learn that on a daily basis with Charlie and Jed. And I think probably more than anything else, I know Jed in particular, when he had jobs with Merrill Lynch and BlackRock previous to working with McMurray Company, he would talk about his employer and the decisions they would make, and pretty seriously criticized the management of those companies he was with. Now that the shoe's on the other foot, it gives him a completely different perspective in terms of having a sensitivity to the decisions he's making and the significance of those decisions with respect to how it affects the people that work at McMurray Company, because now he doesn't want to be the one being criticized, of course. And obviously you're not always going to make everyone happy, but you do think through what you're doing in a very careful manner. I think it was huge for the experience that both Charlie and Jed got working somewhere else before coming to our business.
Leon, how did you start Durco Foods in the exporting business?
Yeah. So I immigrated to the U.S. from Lebanon. In Lebanon, I was involved in the family business, which was the agricultural sector, was production, packing, and export of summer fruit, mainly grapes. But I didn't have any passion for agriculture. My passion was for trading. So when the civil war erupted in Lebanon, after several attempts of working from different parts, sometime from Amman, Jordan, and sometime from London, I thought that probably the best way would be to come to the U.S., because where else do you go after the U.S.? There's no place else to go. And that was a good safety plan, because we were tired of, and the family, of shunning bombs and bullets. So that prompted us to come to immigrate to America. And of course, because of my background, I came and I came in 1976, just toured for about 2 months, and then decided that for agriculture, Fresno would be a good place to raise a family and start a business. So in 1979, I immigrated here and started Durco as a sole proprietorship, and then started doing some of the products that were, at that time, diversity was important because the territories that I covered was a little bit of Europe and a little bit of the Middle East. So I started working at first because of my background. I came across a company called it was a Fiberboard Corporation in Antioch, which later on the rights to they produced a chemical pouch called Grape Guard SO2. It was an in-package device for keeping grapes in cold storage for a long time. So I went and obtained the exclusive agency for Lebanon and also for not exclusive but representation for Greece, and that was the start. That was an economic engine that helped me catapult Derco and give me time to do other things. And that was very profitable. What I did at the time was to buy the product here, ship it to Lebanon and to Greece. When the vessel, close to the vessel arrival, I would travel to Lebanon and Greece, sell those, take the money, bring it here, and use it to buy other products, and was raisins, almonds, canned fruit, canned tomato. My first order that came from the United Arab Emirates was when I opened my mailbox was a letter of credit for canned tomatoes, and then pulses, lima beans, all kinds of beans, lentils, and that kind of stuff. So as you can see, there was diversity, but I needed the diversity because I didn't know where the next order would come from.
I believe it.
So that was safety. And then, of course, in 85, curious things happened because I was, I sent letters out. At the time, as Lou was mentioning, the modes of communication. I mean, we're in the Derco Foods is a trading business, so the trading company is based on communication, and communication was done through letter writing. So I had a Smith Corona typewriter, as some of you may have seen in the museums. and then there was, the landlines. There were no cell phones. I had a telex. No, but not many people had telexes those days. And then later on, I evolved into faxes, and so I would contact a lot of people and try to establish something. And lo and behold, one day I was communicating with Brazil, and I received a telex back from a gentleman called Giacomo Ragusin, and I told him that I see some statistics that Brazil is buying some dried fruit and nuts. He said, we used to, but we're still under the authoritarian dictatorship of Brazil. So this was in 1983. He says, when things turned better, and we're hoping that democracy will come back. And then in 1985, he sent me a telex. He said, we had a new president elected. The military juntas that were there for 20 years are gone. And Tancredo Neves is our new president. We can work now. So we started from 1985 to almost 1995, 96, when Ago joined our company in 1996. Brazil was an important part of our business, and for good reason, because on the one hand, there was a commercial profit to make, but on the other hand, they had very, very high inflation to the tune of over 100% a year. So that gave us the opportunity to have a commercial profit and the banking profit, because at 2 or 3% per month interest, you know, they will be so happy, because otherwise they would pay double digit. So that really was a good way to kind of solidify and build some some reserves in the company. So that was, and then of course, during that period, we had added a few, maybe 5 or 6 employees, but then the turning point came when in 1996 my son decided to leave his job as a lawyer in LA and join our company. So from there on, that gave us a lot of new blood and strength and to carry on further. And then later on we'll discuss more during that portion of the business.
Did any of you ever had a time where you were worried that you weren't going to make it, that you were not going to be successful, a particularly difficult economic situation, sleepless kind of thing? Did you ever have that?
Well, sleep deprivation at first was part of the deal, because when I just started, I used to source the product during the day and then did the communications at night. So I was both sleep deprived and also deprived of enjoying my family and my kids. Sleepless nights happens because at that time, even if you're profitable, cash flow problems are there, and that causes sleepless nights. Besides the fact that later on, even until now, we have some sleepless nights because we have to deal with currency devaluation, government problems, wars, strikes, port strikes at port of loading, as you know, from last year or 2002, to ports of destination where there are strikes and riots and civil unrest. So those keep us, and later on I'll give you some funny stories about those.
Promise?
Promise.
Okay. Lou, you said you joined, or you saw how successful your father's business was. Were there any tough times during his leadership and then during yours in the early going?
Well, I can always figure out something to worry about. And I think if I lived in a box, I'd find something to worry about.
Yeah, how to get out.
But I would say, I'm guessing there's not a business on the planet that doesn't have something going on that is a cause for concern that you got to deal with, that you focus on, and you go over and over it in your mind. So it's just a function of how much you preoccupy with that particular thing. And probably the degree of the different problems you deal with are, greater or lesser. But I'm not sure that sometimes the lesser ones don't cause you as much worry as the more significant ones, just simply because you're frustrated by it. But yeah, I'll always have sleepless nights.
How did 2007, 8, 9, the Great Recession, as they call it, affect you? Because you're in the construction world, basically.
Yeah, our business volume dropped by 40% during that time frame, so it was a huge hit. And of course, the worries then were how to keep all of your employees occupied, how do you not lose money, and how do you keep a positive outlook on things with both respect to your employees and your customers. So in terms of financial stability, I just took myself off the payroll, and that fixed the problem of cash outflow. And then with regard to employees, we just did our best to keep everybody busy, and we had very few layoffs at the time. And we've since have recovered and surpassed that point in time, so it all worked out.
Yeah, nice going.
But yeah, it was sleepless nights.
Yeah. You too, you started from scratch.
Most of the sleepless nights I had were on Sunday because I had to worry about if everybody was going to be there on Monday. because so often we worked on Saturday to finish some jobs so that I had people to put on jobs on Monday. One time we did a job at a school, and we did metal work for roofing contractors. We go up on this roof, and there's a well area where there's equipment, and there's a mattress in there. Well, I come up there one morning, there's a guy in there just getting up. That's where he slept. Well, I get to talking to him. His father was a swimming pool contractor, and his father threw him out of the house. So at night, or in the afternoon, just before his father came home, he would leave, and then that's where he slept. Then the next morning, he would get up after his father went to work, and he would go home and take a shower, and his mother would feed him, and he'd watch television all day. And before his father came home, then he would leave. Anyway, I ended up hiring this guy. Well, he could walk and chew gum at the same time, and
Hire him.
so, and he worked for us for a while and did a very good job. So, but the biggest problem I had was having people to put on the jobs.
Did you have to ever worry about meeting payroll?
Did we?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my wife says we
Carol will
did.
know. I should have asked her.
I focused on the jobs and getting them completed. So I
That was
didn't.
her worry. then.
I didn't focus on that kind of paperwork.
And still don't to your
Nope.
to your pleasure. Did you guys? I mean, you go to a business school class and you listen to management consultants, God, and they'll say, "Oh, it's really important for leadership to have a vision of the future," and you go towards that vision. Do you guys ever imagine your companies would be as successful as they are now? Did you have that pictured, or did you just keep working to take advantage of what was there? I mean, how'd you get so big, and are you surprised you're so big and successful? Okay, all together now.
Do I go first?
I don't care. Or Lou is ready to crank
Lou,
up
go
here.
ahead.
Well, I guess the first question would be how big is big enough? You know, we're not Warren Buffett for sure.
Oh, by that comparison.
But no, I had no expectations that we would be as successful as we are, or have the earnings that we have. I think the key for any business and how we got through 2008, 2009 was we always saved our money, so we had no debt, and we had the ability to weather the storm without having financial obligations to make from previous bad decisions. But I think for us, we don't really budget what we're going to do next year other than we always want to grow. So if you always grow, you always know you'll be more successful. And so if the focus of attention is always to make that occur, and we do it through a passionate commitment to our customers and doing the right thing for our customers. Our mission statement is to be the most convenient place for our customers to do business, to make it real easy to place an order with Memory Company, and to get it on time, accurately, filled completely with no errors. And just trying to be as committed as you can to doing the right thing for your customer. And so far that's worked for us without making a long-term vision for an end game down the road. So if we keep doing that, I will hope that 20 years from now we'll still be in a position we'll say, geez, I never imagined how we got there.
You mentioned before 50 times, just in terms of product out the door. Charlie was telling us that your customers get serviced the very next day, even if an order comes in late in the afternoon. How many do you ship out a day versus when you started with your dad or when he started? How big is that growth, just in terms of product shipping?
How many do we ship out a day?
1,200 on average.
1,200.
I would guess it
That's
was
a lot.
less than 100, even 30 years ago. But I don't remember,
Yeah.
to be honest. It's a lot more.
Leon?
Yeah, at first, you know, there are many futures. That's why I always, when I think about the future, I think in plural, because at each fork that you take leads you to a different destination. I always felt that we needed to be successful and to grow, but I didn't know which direction that would take us. So for us, the important thing was to create a culture that would enhance, that is challenging, where growth would be possible, and where to create an environment where there was people that worked with us had the psychological comfort and safety to be able to produce to the best of their abilities, and so to at the same time to because funds were limited at first, to be prudent, yet also being risk takers. But our vision more and more clarified as we had, you know, the proverbial, the flywheel that Jim Collins said, you push the flywheel and then other competent hands come. And when 1996, my son joined us, and then later on in the next 4 or 5 years, we had other talented people join us. And so there were more hands pushing that. And as the flywheel was pushed, we were able to see more clearly the different directions that we would take. At first, the objective was being, again, incremental evolutionaries, doing small things and adding to our bottom line. And then we said we also needed more challenging, larger projects. And for one, the first larger project was to get involved in South America between 85 and 1995, and then after that to go into China. And once we did that, we knew that you know, the destiny would change, and that world expansion would be our vision, to go to different markets and to explore different continents. So that's how the vision clarified.
Yeah, you know, I remember sending you an article saying, what are you getting into China for? The history of American success in China is littered with big expectations and failures. And then we discussed it as though somehow I know what I'm talking about. But you, undaunted, went ahead and said, well, heck, we're going to create an office in Beijing, and Ago's going to learn Chinese, and we're going to make it, and by gum, you have. Wasn't that a big, risky gamble for you?
That was, there are a number of things that converged during that time. That was 1998, and so, and you know, the profile of nuts, where we start concentrated on, changed from a fatty food to a food ingredient and health food. So, and during that time, Deng Xiaoping of China, Chinese leader, changed from a controlled economy, was trying to change into a market-based economy. So, and and then China was a culture that I've been fascinated about, and it was a culture that consumed nuts. You didn't have to teach them. In South America, we had to teach them how to eat nuts. Over here, you didn't have to teach them. They were ready. And also during that period of time, in Asia, the rate of increase of the middle class was twice the rate of the population increase. So there was more ready disposable income. So all those converged, and with Ago's readiness to take on China as a project, as a leader of the project, I think it was worthwhile.
Yeah, well, good for you, Congratulations. And obviously you're not selling canned tomatoes anymore.
No.
And so you've concentrated along in
Yes.
terms of this success exclusively on tree nuts.
On tree nuts, yeah. We were for between 1995 till 2011. We also did dried fruit, but the time we were spending with dried fruit was, with the same, small margin. Our industry is a small margin. Large volume, small margins. So we would rather spend it on tree nuts that are worth 3 times more. So our time was better spent that way.
Yeah.
So that's why we decided to concentrate on those tree nuts.
Well, you went from laundromats and refrigeration units to doing, heating, ventilating, air conditioning. You did a lot of stuff. Did you imagine that someday you would be such an exclusive custom maker and distinguished yourself and as big as you are now?
No. Things just kept growing and as we went along. So it wasn't really hard to grow, and even now, if you give your customers really good service and take care of them, and you're honest with them, and give a fair price for a good job, then the work just keeps coming. And I think that's what we do. We've always tried to separate ourselves from everybody else. Why should they use us or instead of somebody else? Just like there's a roofing contractor in Clovis that drives downtown to have us fabricate sheet metal for him, and there's a reason for that. And it's the service, the quality, all of those kinds of things. If he makes a mistake on a job, all he has to do is drive in, we'll fix it. It's not about charging him more money, it's about getting his problem solved so he can get his crew back to work. And so we've always just managed to grow, and with a lot of hard work, of course, but it just comes along.
Yeah. But all three of you value culture of your company. As a matter of fact, Lou, that's how you and I met. You got a hold of me and said, I want a project I'm going to call Esprit de Corps. And I want you to interview all these people and find out what the morale is like and stuff. That's always been an important part of your career and your success, is the culture that your employees work in, right? What do you all do with and for your employees so they're proud of being a Charles McMurray?
Well, part of it, I always like to think of everything being somewhat self-serving. And with regard to the people that work at McMurray Company, it takes so long for someone to figure out what it is we do and to be able to do their job, that if we turned those jobs over very often, we'd be constantly training and nobody would ever be up to speed with doing that job well. And I know it sounds so simple. All we do is buy product and sell product and store it in a warehouse. When it gets down to the detail of that, it's baffling how complicated we can make it. So to preserve the continuity of the people that work there, we try very hard to make it a good place to work. That's one of the parts of our culture, if you will, to accomplish. And one of those is we offer job security. We haven't fired anybody in 5 years in terms of a full-time employee. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's the way it is. We try to get families involved as much as we can. Whenever there's a luncheon before a sales meeting, we invite the families and their children. We have a Christmas breakfast that includes families and children. We have several outings throughout the year that we try to fold in all the employees and their families as much as possible, with the thought being that if the family's supportive of your employee, that's huge in terms of, I think, the relationship you have with that family and with that employee. Plus, over time, when people have been with you for a long time, you get to like them. They're part of your social network, and even though you have to be careful with that, I think in the long run, treating your employees like family gets a lot of return in terms of their commitment to doing a good job for our business. So I think we're successful in that category.
Yeah, well,
And I think Charlie and Jed both treasure that value also.
Yeah. You know, Lou, I just thought of it. You're one of the few employers that I know that openly embrace, or you did, nepotism. You got a lot of employees whose family also works for Charles McMurray. Most companies got rules against that, and you embrace it. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's such a unique practice.
So how many of us are related?
It was 34 last December, but I haven't counted since then. 34 out of them, it was 100 at the time, or 107.
A third of them.
So we have, I know, 3 brothers that all work for us. In some ways, it just seems logical. If you've got a family and one member of the family is an outstanding employee, the probabilities are pretty good that other family members will also be good employees. We've not particularly had a problem with that, except if you have a family member supervising another family member. So we try and be careful not to have that happen, but invariably there is some overlap which takes place. For example, Charlie and Jed. Charlie's our CEO and Jed is responsible for customer service and purchasing. So just the nature of our business, Jed's going to have to take some orders from Charlie, but we try to separate that out by having Jed report directly to our CFO. But some of that is a bit of for show only, because in fact you do have some overlap. And there are other situations where that occurs, but to the greatest extent possible, we try to separate out. And it would be my recommendation in a family business, to the best of your ability, to not have one kid supervising the other, and try to relieve those issues as much as possible.
Yeah. Leon, your culture, you're a smaller company, but you have, 7 different foreign languages spoken there. An incredibly talented and diverse group. How do you get everybody to belong to the Derco flag?
Well, the culture, as I was suggesting, we embed things in the culture, like the comfort and ability to speak up without being, without being critical. That safety that they feel, that they can express themselves without being criticized. The trust that we give them, the environment of trust, where they feel they are valued and appreciated. And then we also, have the way we provide remuneration. There are merit bonuses that we give. There's a company profit sharing plan that we fund 100%. And so all those go into that understanding of that management appreciates their input and their contributions, and also it's such a beautiful thing. We have weekly Skypes with our offices in Beijing, where we link our offices in Beijing, in Dubai, and in New Delhi, and see different ethnicities, different nationalities, different religions, different customs, different traditions, but yet they are mindful of the task. They're task-oriented, and they row in the same direction. They're result-oriented, and the synthesis of that kind of interaction yields tremendous results, and I think we find it tremendously rewarding. And that way you can tackle difficulties knowing that everybody is on the same page, and you can also enjoy the rewards of that toil whenever there are rewards to enjoy.
And food, even though you're in the food industry, is an important part of your culture there, isn't
That's right. That's right. It is. Yeah.
Golly. Well, we heard about the entire Four Seas gang, 80 plus people going to the mountains for camping. Did you have this kind of build the culture in the employees even before your sons came up with this camping idea?
No.
Okay, next question.
I always tried to treat everybody fair, and I always tried to put myself in their position. If I asked them to do something or work for a certain pay, those kinds of things. We do a lot of work out of town, and I always tried to look at it from their side and see if it was fair. Did we give them sufficient money to stay out of town and that sort of thing? But the stuff that we do now with the camping and that sort of thing, I have had nothing to do with.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
He started.
He
That's
did.
why
He
we do what we do today, because the culture he started in the beginning.
yeah. Let alone he did all the barbecuing at that
He
thing
might
for
have
all
not
the.
taken him camping, but he treated him.
Yeah. I was going to say and make public, Dale, I interviewed one of your key employees a week ago, and he said if it wouldn't be for Dale, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be in this industry. He's taught me everything. He was a great mentor to me. So, there, take that in public. Well, when did the three of you, I suppose, Lou, this is going to be the easiest question for you in comparison to these two founders, but when did you decide this was going to be a family business? Lou, you were born into it, right?
Yes, but then the next generation, though, was still a question.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So I was born into it, although I didn't have to do it, and there was no requirement on my dad's part that pressured me to be involved with the McMurray Company, but I never questioned the idea that I would, so it was never an issue for me. With my two sons, I told them that would be an option if they chose to do that, but if they didn't, that's okay too. In fact, it would probably simplify my life if they didn't be involved. But on the other hand, I can see an awful lot of virtues and satisfaction in having the family business go from generation to generation. And Jed had always shown an interest. Charlie, not so much so until probably in college. And so it evolved, but it wasn't ever a thing that was assumed from birth that would occur.
Mm-hmm. Did you have siblings, right? They weren't interested in the business?
I have a sister. She lives in Los Angeles, and she worked very briefly summers at McMurray Company, and I bought her interest out in 1986.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, Leon, when did you decide that? I remember you telling me once you wish you could just go have a home office and just be by yourself like the good old days. That must have been before Ago came.
Oh, definitely.
Or maybe after.
Definitely before. No, I mean, first of all, you know, I didn't think about the family business because, you know, my son was wanted to be a lawyer, and my daughter was not interested in the business. She wanted to be an emergency room doctor, which she became, and which my son also became. And then in 1996, you know, Ago decided to join our company, and that was a decision, I think, prompted by the fact that my wife was suffering from terminal cancer, and he wanted to be of help to me. And maybe partly also prompted by the fact that maybe he was disappointed in the field of the law. So that's, you can ask him the question later. He's seated in the back there. But after he joined, we were not thinking about creating a family legacy or family business. We were just thinking about creating a good business, a culture where people will thrive. Both of us think that, you know, our best contribution would be to change other people's lives for the better, to make that difference that otherwise they would not have. So that was one of the driving forces. Of course, in order to be able to do that, you have to have a profitable company, or you know, good intentions are not enough. So I think with that in mind, you know, we started, with China. What we did was, we had tough times together. We had very tough times together, and we also had good times together and very good times together. We were constantly in conversation with each other, and of course, as the other people joined, well, we could also get them involved in decision making. But with Ago and I mean, we had disagreements. We had lots of disagreements. We continue to have disagreements, but we never let that conversation stop. We never let those disagreements get in the way of what is important for us, which was our relationship, and our relationship not only with each other, but our relationship with our other family members, which were the staff, our staff. And that's, I think, one of the things that probably differentiates us, is that for us, everybody in our office is treated as family. Full stop. There's no other way of treating them. That's why we treat them with respect, and they in turn show respect for us. And then, of course, after in China, we made a lot of mistakes. But we also, one of the things that is in our culture is to remember those mistakes and to take advantage of, to remember not to repeat those mistakes. And so we created a culture where mistakes are encouraged, because if nobody is making a mistake, this means nobody is working. So and also when we prepared ourselves for bad luck, to mitigate bad luck and to take advantage of good luck, and so that was also a part of our culture. For that to happen, you have to be prudent, and you have to have a culture in which previous experiences are embedded in it, so you know when it is danger is looming, or when an opportunity is at hand. So and then in 2013 we ventured into opened our representative office in Dubai. This is an interesting thing. Why Dubai? Dubai has become a center, especially after the sanctions against Iran. Dubai has become a hub in the Middle East, where all of the activity around in that area, we being a free port, they come and buy from there. 40% of all walnuts and almonds that California ships end up in Iran. So that is also shows you that government's control on traffic, on commerce, is not that perfect, or cannot be that perfect. And then in 2015, Ago and I decided that it was time to, that India was a continent, not a country. And if we are in China with 3 billion people, we should also be in India with 1.3 billion people. And we have been working with India, but we didn't have a presence there. And so we started the presence soon. So now, slowly, that global reach is possible because of the people that we have, who are dedicated, who are smart, and who are ready to sacrifice. So,
And it all starts with a Smith Corona typewriter. Gee whiz. When did you think it was going to be a family business? You and Carol, because of her accounting skills and her great nature and strength, were partners early, but did you think of it as a family business then for your sons as well?
Not really. In fact, I put them to work as soon as they got a driver's license. They got something to drive, and that was so they could get to the jobs. And I did not put them on easy jobs. They were on the most miserable jobs there was. So I really thought they'd want to do something else and move on. But they didn't
work.
Well, no, I'm glad they didn't. But I just assumed at the time, because I didn't know what was going to happen. But
Yeah. And I bet, knowing you were not going to let the employees think that because they're your sons, they're going to have it better or easier. So you stuck them with some of the worst jobs.
well, that too.
Yeah.
They had to learn the hard way that, if they can't do the hard stuff, they're not going to do the easy stuff either. So,
Yeah.
that's just the way I felt about it. And they needed to know what happened at the bottom, not just what happens in an office. So they had to earn their position inside.
Yeah. Can you see 4Cs as a family-owned business going to another generation?
I could see that, yes. I have two grandsons that are mechanically interested, that I think could, one of Graydon's sons and one of Preston's sons. So I could see that happening.
Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't,
Well, if it doesn't, it doesn't.
it's okay with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to force one of them to be there if that's not what they want to do. If they want to go do something different, then that's what they need to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are a lot of European family businesses where this will continue and you will work here.
No, I don't want to do that, Joe.
No, that's
No.
far away. Lou, is there going to be a fourth generation McMurray family-owned company?
Well, it's certainly possible. Both Jed and Charlie have two children, all boys. And, I think with a generational concept, so much of it has to do with just the follow the cards. And the follow the cards, I mean, do your kids have an interest? Do they have the mental capacity to do the job? Do they have the work ethic to do the job?
Values.
Do they get along with people, and do they have a teamwork kind of mentality? Are they drug addicts and alcoholics? You have the whole range of potential situations, and I would think that the most difficult situation would be if you have one child that is very competent and able to carry on the family tradition, and another one which is just simply can't, and how you address that and how you deal fairly with both of those children. So to me, it's kind of how it evolves, not so much how I could direct it. It is what opportunities will come about as time goes on, and the capability and the interest of the kids.
Mm-hmm. Leon, do you care that your company with its global reach will continue well past you and Argo?
Of course, I would hope so, that it will continue in some form or another, because what we have worked for the last 20 years with Argo is to put the pieces together so that it works seamlessly. But as all of us know, a company is not its logo or its name. It is the people that are there, and whether we will have that human resources that really make the company, that is something I think for the next generation to worry about. And I'll pass that mantle to my son, who has gladly assumed the yoke and the responsibility of the succession.
Yeah. At what point? Go ahead. You were going to say
Well,
something?
I was going to think of the philosophy of, let's say you're looking to have an individual manage your company, and you're hiring this individual, and you put out the job description, CEO of McMurray Company, and the job pays well, and there's opportunity to earn bonuses, and by Fresno standards, I think by any definition, it's a good job to have. Well, there'd be some real good applicants walking the door applying for that job. And let's say one of those applicants is one of your children. What's the likelihood that that child of yours would rise to the top in terms of the best quality individual that you would hire for this job? And if you look at it in that kind of an objective feeling, it's very difficult to say, particularly with respect to your grandkids, will they end up managing our business? Because how could you possibly predict how that scenario is going to sort out?
Yeah, yeah. Anything in particular that any of you have done to get your son ready? How do you set this succession up, and at what point did you know that it was time for him to have that mantle, that pressure, responsibilities, and you could then begin to have less role? Was there a point?
I don't think for us there was a single point. I think it was a long process. First they had to work, and then just, it just came together. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a decision at any certain point. It was just a long time.
Yeah, but you made sure that both of your sons worked in a whole bunch of different areas in the company, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause they've got their arms around this company. They get all the moving parts and stuff.
Yes.
Whether it's in your specialty shop, or whether it's the office and the human resources, let alone what goes on in the field. That was part of their preparation to eventually succeed you, right?
Well, it was just part of their education, but it's kind of funny. We used to race sprint cars, and in racing, if you crash a car, the crew has to be ready to do whatever it takes to have the car ready for the next race. If it's a wing, if it's a front axle, if it's a rear end, if it's a whole car, whatever happens, the crew has to be ready. And from that, we've used that a lot of times in our business in being ready for our jobs, and where we can build speed in the jobs to get them done faster and things like that. So both of the boys were involved in the racing. So not only did they get the worst jobs as far as 4Cs was concerned, but they were very involved in the racing. So they learned a lot from that to this day we still apply to our business, as far as being prepared and just a lot of different things that go on. Not to let things slip through the cracks. Like with racing, all you got to do is make one little mistake or one adjustment that is wrong. Well, the same thing can apply to the fasteners that we send to a job site, or the tool that we send to a job site. It could take 8 hours to do it with one tool, or 4 hours with a different tool. So those are the kind of things that we learned from racing to make sure we had everything perfect as we could possibly get it, and that's the same way we run the jobs.
But was there a point where you said, it's too complicated, that administrative office stuff I hate, I'm not doing that anymore, it's yours?
No, there wasn't a specific time. It's just been a slow process, little by little.
Except you never have liked office work, so
No,
that
I-
was from the beginning.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
I did what I did best, and Carol did what she did best, and we were just lucky that it fit together.
And that's how your sons are operating today. They
Yes.
do what they're best at.
Yes,
Yeah. So are you happy to have handed the baton off?
very handy, very happy.
Yeah, it's handy and happy.
Yes, very, very happy.
What's the best part of that for you?
Just to see my sons, take things to the next level. Computers were not necessarily something that I obviously didn't grow up with them, but that kind of stuff is not where I fit the best. I can put a job together and I can run a job and I can understand all the nuts and bolts and all of that and where to cut and where to make the job shine. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's beyond me. Well, they understand that stuff much better than I do, so they've been able to take the entire business to the next level because they understand a lot of that stuff way better than I do.
Yeah. Were you aiming, Lou, at a particular age for you to finally say it's time, or did you wait for Charlie and Jed to develop and then you could do it? When did you decide I'm no longer in the hot seat?
Well, it evolved. We've been, as a company, professionally managed for quite some time. Previous to Charlie being our CEO, we had a general manager, but he took care of most of the day-to-day operations, and way too much work for me to want to do it. So I was kind of used to that format. So then when Charlie and Jed started, in both cases it caused me a lot of anxiety in terms of how they would fit in and if they would like it or not, and if they would have the kind of cultural mindset necessary to fit in the way that I would choose for it to be. And even how they would get along between each other.
Yeah.
So from my concept, they even had options since they had done their qualifications of getting an MBA, of working successfully somewhere else, of being financially independent of me. I felt comfortable that they could work in a management position within the company, but they didn't necessarily have to run it. We could always go hire someone to run it. And it's not a bad option at all, because there's some good folks out there that could do that for you, and they can still work there in a very meaningful role. But given that they had the desire and inspiration to not only just work there and be part of the management team, but actually take the leading role in managing the company, was wonderful from my point of view. Big commitment on their part to do so. But again, it evolved because I had that level of comfort came along slowly for me.
But you're happiest now.
Yeah, I'm very happy. Jed's only been there 3 years, I believe, at this point. So it's just now starting to be a greater level of comfort for me with respect to Jed. Charlie's been there 10 years, so more so.
Yeah. Leon, you happy Ago came aboard back in '96, but you're happier even now, right?
Absolutely. And the nice thing about it was that my temperament is entrepreneurial and risk-prone, and Ago's temperament is process-oriented, detail-oriented, and more risk-averse. So the synthesis of us working together yielded good results, and so that was great. And of course, what gives me a great deal of pressure, I come from an entrepreneurial family. My grandfather had an artisanal textile factory in a town called Antep now in Turkey. And so I'm sure he thought that he was going to pass on that business to at least one, maybe both of his kids. And then World War I broke out, and the Armenian genocide happened, and he was deported to a Syrian town called Aleppo, Syria. I should tell Gary Johnson of the, of the
What's in Aleppo?
yeah, what's an Aleppo? So, and then that didn't happen. Then my uncle went to and worked in Sudan. He operated a canteen for the British forces, and also he shipped ostrich feathers to England, where they did dusters. That was big business. He told me before he passed away. And then, of course, southern Sudan was not a good place. And so my dad went, he was a pharmacist, graduated from the American University of Beirut, my alma mater, in 1932. And he went and opened the first pharmacy in a town called Kamishli, which is on the border, Syrian and Iraqi border. I don't know what prompted him to go open his pharmacy. I think he loved hunting, and there was a lot of good game there. Probably that was the reason. But those places were not there. So in 1946, they decided to join together and start their business in Lebanon, in Beirut, and where I was born. And you know, they developed a good business, pharmaceutical import and distribution, as well as an agricultural operation, which was fairly promising. And then the Lebanese Civil War broke, and they had good hopes, and I had good hopes of inheriting that. That didn't happen. So it is, you know, I feel, and my family feels so fortunate to be able to live in America, where freedom reigns, where you're not worried about you know, bombs falling. And so I have the great opportunity to be able to pass this business to my son. But passing it probably is not the correct word to use, because it implies a magnanimous giving. But I started this business in 1979, and my son joined in 1996, which means that 96 to 2016, we've spent 20 years. So I spent more time with him in the company, so and building this company together, and therefore, it was, as Dale was saying, this was not an event, it was a progression, and he was willing to take on more responsibility and more responsibility. Good example. We were sitting in our office in Asia Tower in Fengtai district in China, and we had, at that time, we had a retail distribution business that we were pursuing, which was grossly unsuccessful, and after 3 years we had to close. But all these, we're in our office, everybody is speaking, nobody is speaking English or any of the other 6 languages that we know. They're speaking Chinese, and Ago says afterwards, we are like there's an old country saying, that we are like the deaf person at the Bedouin wedding. There's a lot of drums and things, but we're not hearing anything. So afterwards he said, he said, "Dad, I'm going to study Mandarin Chinese." And the first thing he did when we returned, he went to the Monterey Institute, and he went through several months of intensive course, and then followed after that for years with a tutor. So that kind of commitment, that's only not giving but also taking, you know, because these things you can't give. It has to be that draw. So I give credit to him for that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I envy the three of you. I don't get a chance to go to my children's little league and soccer games and swim meet thing, or I never see them in action. And they're successful, and I'm proud of them, but I've never once seen them do a day of work. And the three of you have that pleasure of seeing your sons who are all winners. And I'm convinced the almond didn't fall far from the tree in these three examples. Just one last question. We'll find out more from your daughters-in-law in a month from now, so I won't ask about their involvement in the business. But one last thing. Does the word retirement mean anything to any of you? It means nothing to me whatsoever. I got a bias here, but does the word retirement mean anything to you guys? We're all at that age, you know.
Well, for me,
Oh, happy birthday yesterday.
thank you.
Yeah.
For me, it took a while to accept, and it was actually pretty scary. Just the thought of maybe not being needed, not being involved, not doing it, just didn't appeal to me. So it's taken a while to accept and be able to. I've taken a couple of months to stay home and get things done, because I put a lot of effort into work, but not much effort into doing things at home. So I needed to do a lot of things at home. And so I'm trying to get things done there, but I still end up at the office 3 or 4 times a week. But I'm trying to do more there right now just to get it done, and then I'll see what happens. Maybe next summer I'll get to go to work on jobs again. We'll see.
That doesn't sound retirement to me.
No, he's not going to retire. He's the most talented guy out in the field, for God's
I
sake.
enjoy doing it.
Yeah,
so
why not? Luke, can you picture yourself retired or doing what you're doing now, which is gradually tapering?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to that, and in terms of working, I try to take responsibility for as little as possible. So I still show up at the office every day that I'm in town, but not all day, and I come and go when I please. But I'm there every day. But that's important for me to have an office to go to, and then also have some involvement with the company. I like to know what's going on, and I participate in quite a lot, I would say. And Charlie and Jed listen to what I have to say, and I think the real challenge, and which you have to be careful about, is not being involved intimately in every activity that goes on, but then developing an opinion about it without knowing the whole picture, and then expressing an opinion that might not be the best solution simply because you're not tuned in on what's going on.
Very good.
So for me,
Very
you have to be
good, yeah.
really careful. You can't have it both ways, and so
That's true.
I try and not start swinging my elbow, so to speak, very often. One of the ways we do decision making is by committee, and that's worked out very well for us, and it works well with the family structure, because then you can have some non-family and family in that committee to make major decisions that you have to make. Sometimes I'm part of that committee and sometimes I'm not, but we've done things by committee for a long, long time at McMurray Company since we had a general manager for many years past, so that our structure might be a little different than where the sole proprietor and founder makes every little decision, is involved in every little detail. It has never been that way for me.
Yeah.
But in terms of
To your
retiring,
credit.
that would mean not having an office to go to, and not having an office to go to, it wouldn't be a good option for me.
And your wife Dina sitting in the back agrees with that.
That'd be a lot of time with Dina, huh?
Yeah. Well, there is a rule in family businesses that the founder's not allowed to retire because the spouse won't let him. I mean, that's just a common fact. Leon, you working less?
I'm working less. Most of the decisions, daily decisions, and one of the things is, if I agree completely with Lou. If you want to participate in the decision making, I have to read 150 to 200 substantive emails a day, and I'm feeling that as a more of a larger picture person and not a detailed person, I don't want to do that. Yet, you know, you also have to plan for the future. You have to, when you retire, you have to be happy to go to something rather than sad for leaving something. So, and then, you know, you don't want your successor to say, how can I miss you when you're not gone? so I'll find a way to retire. Still, it's in an amorphous situation, but certainly I'm not participating in the daily decision making.
And you're also not traveling as much.
No.
Ago and his wife, Nairi, they represent your company at international meetings and stuff like that. You don't want to do that anymore either.
I can't even represent as graciously and as elegantly as the two of them do, so
Yeah.
I better stay put.
You know your place now, huh?
Exactly.
Well, we've got about 3-4 minutes. Does anybody have a question you would like to ask any of these folk? Yes.
Your sons talked last time about long-term employees in your companies. And so if you could maybe speak to how you dealt with the switch from your leadership to their leadership with your long-term employees. And when they got
Good
used, they
question.
were used to coming to you for things and all of that. So how did you make sure that that transition was smooth?
That's a good question.
It is.
Part of it, I think, comes with some of the long-term employees aren't happy, particularly that they feel that I'm no longer in charge. But that's by far the minority, because I think both Charlie and Jed has earned their position in respect of the employees and know that they will listen to what they have to say and respond respectfully to what they have to say. And part of our culture is to seek out ideas and ways to do things better from our employees. And Charlie and Jed have both taken on that concept as part of what makes our business thrive. And so I think the respect of an employee has to be earned. It can't just be taken for granted. And I think they've earned that respect. And again, since I was not the general manager now for years, they were used to not necessarily reporting directly to me. So the transition of Charlie and Jed from the old general manager was probably the bigger issue from them, and there was a lot of stress involved because he was a good guy and they all loved him. But it's evolved and it's worked out, and it's all the old timers. You know, they say it's different, and I have to respond. Yes, it's different, but it's just as good or better than it was. So it evolves.
Anybody else want to take a shot at that good question? Yeah. Okay.
I think you did a good job.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, Glenn.
I'm hearing no, conflict, adversity with your son during this transition. So share some of the difficult times transitioning with your son, because
Do you want to go back to last month's participants?
Well, no, I'm trying to hear it from the father.
No, I know it, Glenn. I know.
So it sounds like you guys it was all wonderful.
Well, no, Leon says they disagree all the time. Or
Yeah,
not all
we
the time.
disagree all the time, which is, but disagreeing without being disagreeable and with being mindful, not to that disagreement get in the way of important things in the relationship, is a good thing. First of all, it breeds strength in the relationship, and then it becomes a relationship of equals, and that's why problems, not that problems or arguments become irrelevant, but they don't get in the way of keeping on the conversation going and finding a solution that is thinking out of the box.
We didn't have ego
usually the problems start with the father. Usually they do, because it's somebody who just can't let go or has issues, and in that our problems, our disagreements are on strategy, or on trading, or on things like that.
Which is healthy.
But they haven't been about
No.
transition.
No.
Because, and the employee question, I've been there longer than anybody else. So that doesn't apply to us. I've been there 20 years. I'm
Yeah.
a lot older than the other guys. And I've been there longer in the business. So yeah, we argue a lot.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But it's about the business. It's not about the succession.
No, succession has never been an issue. If it's wonderful that we have, because one of the things that Ago does, and when it is time for decisive leadership, he can make those decisions. He's ready to make those decisions and accept the consequences. But most of the time, because we deal in teams, he also creates the space for others, and so he also shares that decision making with others, lets others make the decisions. So, and I think he's eminently successful in both areas.
Good.
Can I make one
Yes,
comment?
please.
One of the things that we've done is we have meetings with Charlie, Jed, myself, and Neil to talk about things that might be of a concern to any one of us. And we do that fairly regularly, 3 or 4 times a year. So that if there's any pent-up aggravations, you have the opportunity then to talk it over, and I think trying to address something really early on is just absolutely critical with getting along. Then secondly, we have a family meeting that includes the wives, Charlie's wife, Jed's wife, and my wife Dina, with Neil. And some of those haven't gone so well. We've always come out good at the end, but there's been some tears involved in those meetings, and some subjects that are tough, because Charlie and Jed work a lot, and they both have families that their wives want them to be home and taken care of, and so there's that conflict of working long hours on one hand for the company and balancing that time at home with the family, and that's kind of an ongoing thing that isn't easy to solve and probably never will be completely put to bed. But we don't agree on things, but I only remember one time when I was lividly upset about an issue, and that's been over 10 years. And I don't think it's going to happen again with me. So we have disagreements. I think there's a difference between a disagreement and a fight. Disagreements you work out respectfully with discussion, without people being upset and with holding a grudge and with the resentment. And then there's angry battles whereby everybody gets upset and polarized, and you can't ever come together. To me, they're two different things. And I think having meetings with the family, and I think I would advise an outside consultant that's skilled, such as Neil, to participate in that can be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great endorsement of Neil, and we want to thank Neil for bringing all of the families here to join us and share this information. We thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful evening.